So the context of my action research project is I teach at Harwood Union High School. I am one member on a 9th grade team, and I teach a class called Personal and Future Exploration. And this class has been in existence for about 10 years, and it's changed pretty dramatically this year. It's a one semester long class for all 9th grade students. And the requirement for all 9th grade students to take it is something that's new this year. In the class, students explore who they are, different elements of their personalities, their strengths, learning style preferences. There's a huge component to it to research different careers and do a job shadow as an exploration of possibilities that could exist for students beyond high school. And they also set academic, career, and personal goals in order, in part, to develop a personal learning plan. So this is the first year that students have had to develop a personal learning plan at Harwood, and it's the first real introduction that many students have had to what a PLP is. My research question was around goals, and how do students articulate, implement, assess, reflect upon, and revise a personal exploration goal over the course of a one-semester class. I focused on personal exploration because I really wanted students to not feel constrained by academic goal limitations. I wanted them to think about something that they really wanted to learn more about and explore that over the class. And I also really wanted to look into the goal-setting process itself and how giving students the opportunity to work on a goal that was structured and that they had time to work on in class would affect their sense of self-direction and be able to work independently. My findings. In terms of goal setting, and I had about 62 students. So in terms of goal setting, there were really 3 students who set personal exploration goals that were very outside of what they were doing in their classes. And those students, there were only 3 of them who were able to accomplish their goals or make a lot of progress toward their goals. And do that without help from me or instruction from me other than occasional checking in. In terms of rating performance-based goals, and just to back up about the goals for a moment, the goals that I had students write were based on SMART goals. So they were really specific. I had them set manageable goals. I had them do action steps to address their goals. They're also really relevant. I wanted the goals to be something that was relevant and also realistic to who they were in a timely way. So we worked a lot on the structure of the goal that they set. And in terms of the outcome of the goal, I really wanted them to focus on identifying a habit or a disposition that they could work on improving. So rather than having students set goals that were more outcome-based, like I'm going to get an A in this class, I wanted them to work on, well, what are the habits that you can work on? What are the dispositions that you can develop in order to improve your learning in some way? And one of the measurements of that would be that your grade might improve, but you're also really focusing in on this disposition. So working with students on that did help students identify some habits of work that they could improve. And this was also in tandem with the 9th grade team as a whole, starting off the school year talking about different habits of work and identifying 6 habits of work and really emphasizing them in our classes so students were familiar with what those habits were and could pinpoint, okay, so this particular habit is going to help me improve in this area in order to get the A or improve my performance. Despite being able to identify what habits of work students wanted to focus on, the outcome was still really related to, in most instances, getting a grade that they wanted, instead of improving their understanding in a certain area. So I still want the honors designation rather than I'm going to improve my understanding in reading. And so in terms of improving their understanding, they were still really interested in that idea of getting the grade rather than being intrinsically interested in learning and wanting to explore their knowledge. And so that focus was still on how did I do, what's the final assessment, rather than what did I learn from this. In terms of the goal process, one thing that I found is that as a ninth grade team, we hadn't talked to one another about what students were going to be doing in our classes around goals. And what I discovered is that about 3 weeks into the semester, when I started talking to students about goals, they'd already set goals in each class, multiple goals in each class. And all of the formats were different. So the format that I wanted them to use, which was much more structured, and they were a little overwhelmed with the number of goals that they had to manage. Another finding is that involving families in the process was a part of my action research project. I had students do a family conference at home and record it on their goals to get some feedback. And one of my findings was that many students did this goal conference. That feedback loop had to be maintained, and it wasn't. So they had that initial conversation with their families, but that wasn't extended. And then because students had set these goals, but the goals weren't on their PLPs yet, and they weren't actively collecting evidence and reflecting on that, then the families didn't have a way of tracking the goal progress of their students. And so in my correspondence with families, the emphasis really remained on how is my student doing in this class, what's their grade, rather than what are they learning, what are they exploring through their PLP. So based on these findings, there's some challenges that I had in trying to implement this in a one-semester class, this process of goal setting. So I have 4 discoveries. And altogether, these discoveries result in a really fundamental shift in how students learn. So the first 2 have to do with sort of school culture and classroom practice. One of my discoveries was that it's really important to cultivate a shift in mindset for students. So we've told students that they need to have these PLPs, and they're free to explore what they want, that the PLPs are a vehicle for personal exploration and growth and learning. And yet we haven't given them the tools to be able to work independently or think independently. They've had all of these years of schooling where they've been told that they have to get a certain grade and think a certain way. And we're giving them these PLPs that I think are amazing. But the students aren't seeing that. They're seeing it as extra work. And their mindset is in a very particular place. This isn't an opportunity. It's actually really terrifying to have to think independently, even if school doesn't work for them right now. So the second discovery was that reflection skills are an essential component in making PLPs and goals something that can be really successful for students. So emphasizing, rather than discipline content, emphasizing how to think about what you've learned and where that's going to take you and what next steps and revisions you could make in your learning and your habits based on what you've done is something that's really important, that critical thinking. The third discovery that I had, and the fourth, have more to do with family and school connections. So going back to that idea of all of the ninth grade teachers had students set goals, we really need to collaborate as a team. We really need to have these conversations, not only about what we're doing with students, but how together we can make PLPs living things rather than something that's kind of static and dead. And then the fourth discovery was that having families be really actively involved and engaged in the process stimulates student acceptance of PLPs and buy-in to that. So there are 4 implications that I came up with for my practice. And that first is how to cultivate a shift in student mindset. There's a history teacher at my school named Kathy Cadwell who works a lot with Socratic dialogue and Socratic seminars. She's getting students to ask the questions rather than do school. And so I'm going to be working with her more next semester to figure out questions and dialogues that I can be working on with my students so that they can become more self-directed learners, but within a context that's just having conversations in class, so it's not high stakes. Learning those skills to direct their own learning, because with the PLPs, it is self-directed. The second implication is to really work on teaching reflection skills. I found that having a tool for reflection, certain prompts that I use, maybe for multiple activities that I've done with students or projects that students have done, is something that I have to develop. That the idea of assessing whether a student has done something with learning styles is less important, that content knowledge is less important than their reflection about what they learned and what they're going to do with it. So the assessments that I'm going to be doing next semester are going to be based much more on reflection. And so that involves adapting the content a little bit to focus more on those critical thinking skills. And also working with the 9th grade team, particularly the humanities teachers, to coordinate what we're doing with reflection so that students are getting that not just in my class, but in all classes. And that goes along with the develop a whole team approach, not only to simplify goal setting so that students are really focusing in on a few goals rather than multiple numbers of goals, but also working as a team to have students have, say, 2 or 3 goals, and then we're all working together in our different classes to monitor what those goals are and to help students track their progress and to communicate with each other about that. And then the third part of that is really educating teachers about PLPs. Right now, to my knowledge, I'm the only teacher in the high school who has a working knowledge of PLPs and is doing anything with them. And what happens in my class, unfortunately, stays in my class. It doesn't translate into what other teachers are doing. So students work on PLPs with me, but not with anyone else. And I'd really like to change that to show that PLPs can be a tool for learning and reflection. And then the fourth implication is really develop those family connections in order to support students. Teach families the what, why, and how of PLPs. And that could be through an open house event, it could be through monthly emails, which will probably be much easier given that this is second semester and I have a new group of kids and we don't actually have an open house for parents in the second semester. And then inviting families to participate in the development of a PLP through those goal-setting conferences, something that I'm going to be a little bit more intentional and structured about than I was this semester.